was most impactful from the Administrator Academy? What's a big idea that you walked away from that thinking, I need to look into that more, or it resonated in a particular way, or maybe you had a personal or professional insight, whatever it was, if you can identify that. And then the second part of that is a question you left with. Maybe something you've been mulling over and thinking about and wondering about since our time together.
For me, I took so many different notes, and it was really trying to organize my thoughts in so many ways. But what I really took away is, kind of the starting with baby steps and really looking at some small things to, I always say with my staff, like, we're going to dip our toe into some things. And so there was a couple things that before all this I was starting. I did a mindful minute on the announcements each day. I already worked I had a mindful March bulletin board in our lunchroom. And then I was working with my team, my school improvement team, on possibly looking into like a mindfulness corner or something like that within our building. Like, where would that be? What would we put in it? How would we supervise it? And then we were talking about some of the books that were mentioned during our time together and which ones would be great for kind of like a beginning, book talk for my staff, just to kind of get people in, get people aware, and just kind of starting small before going larger. And then also for myself, learning and developing and continuing to research as well. And then you said some big questions, really was, you've created an amazing curriculum and things like that at your building, and kind of also what possibly types of curriculum that we could bring into an elementary setting that could be helpful. There were some in the book that I read that I liked, but then also there were quite a few books that were mentioned during our time together, and what might be kind of that best starter off book, especially for staff that might not be 100% on board yet.
Yeah. So I think one of the things we did really well in our building is exactly what you said you're doing, and that is baby steps.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't jump into program mode. We didn't jump into curriculum mode or importing a curriculum. Instead, we thought about where are places in the building where mindfulness can add value, and what are experiences we could create that add value for people who are interested in mindfulness.
Mm-hmm.
And then we just kept doing that. And then people experience it. They're impacted by it. They talk about it. More people reach out and crave some sort of experience. And then it slowly you start building capacity.
Yeah.
So we're talking about curriculum.
Okay.
And how it will be more formally embedded within the curriculum, and ways to do that, and best practices and all of that. But it took 5 years of doing exactly what you're doing. So I think you're in a really good space and place in terms of thinking about baby steps. I would say keep asking yourself, where can mindfulness add value? And who's interested in mindfulness, and what specific aspects are they interested in? And I can have, I can email out directly just books that we've had for like book talks. That's
Right.
one baby step that we've done, is just go over books and have a group of teachers who are interested join the book group, and then we talk about it. But just slowly building capacity. There's no rush.
Yeah, and especially now, even virtually, we've been talking about, and we do a lot of restorative practices at my building anyway, and so talking about before even just starting virtually with a group of students, do a mindful minute, or do kind of like a morning circle virtually with your students, and just kind of before diving into any kind of curriculum or anything right now, just to allow that time for your students and let that calm settle before even getting into any of this virtually. So, there's several teachers that are doing that now too. So that's really great.
That is great. And it taking that approach, in my opinion, prevents a situation that I've seen in working with other schools, where if you rush and you don't build interest and capacity and you import a curriculum, then you end up superimposing someone's idea of mindfulness onto a bunch of people who may not yet be interested and or ready, and then they resist it. And they see it.
Yeah, we've seen that with other curriculums too.
Yeah. And so I think you're taking the right approach, and I'm happy, and I'm sure Toby and Lauren are also happy to continue to be resources and share books, ideas. Lauren had that whole room that she decked out, that mindfulness room.
Yeah.
I'm pretty jealous of.
But I think it's needed, and to be able to supervise it and have different ideas for that. I think that's where my school improvement team is going to come in, because if I'm just the one saying, okay, this is what we're doing, but if I can get my building leaders involved and on board with it and behind it, I think that's what's going to really take it off too.
Absolutely. And it's I obviously think it's very important work, and it's so important that you want to handle it gently on the front end, and not create a situation again where people feel like it's being shoved down their throat, and that happens. I mean, some schools take that approach, and then you get this surreal experience where you're talking to teachers who are angry about mindfulness, and it's like, well, how did this happen?
Right. Why do I have to do this breathing?
Yeah. And it's not because they don't actually they might not be in theory opposed to the actual practice or the philosophy, streamlined in a way that hasn't taken into account their opinion or their input, and we all know how much teachers like that.
Yes.
So good work, and like I said, don't hesitate to reach out. After this, we'll create, or I'll put together an email with a bunch of potential resources based on all the things you guys are saying tonight.
First, I loved the whole idea of the well-being coordinator position. That's my goal. But for right now, I'm doing that in my building, but I'd love to just be that for my district. And I think also I left with lots of ideas. And in particular, I was thinking about the support groups that you had mentioned you do for teachers in the morning. I think you may have said special education teachers. And I definitely saw that as somewhere where I could support teachers just with some of the experiences that happened right when I came back, with teachers venting and watching them interact with certain students that are challenging and things like that. And I was like, yeah, I need to work some more with our SEC teachers. I also loved the concept of embedding mindfulness into the curriculum. I really think that's a great way, like in not only helping PE, but with biology and talking about brain science and things like that. That really stuck with me. Yeah, I mean, I'm making strides in my building. I have a very supportive principal. I've been feeding my teachers and staff little bits of mindfulness practice for a while now through Inner Explorer and Mindful Schools and things like that. So I definitely have some allies. What Toby talked about in terms of bell to bell experience, really, instead of bell to bell instruction, really stuck out with me as well, because we're moving to a block schedule where the classes will be a little longer, an hour and a half, and we've been piloting that this year. And you know, I hear the, you know, bell to bell instruction and this, the kind of thing, and I was thinking this is a great time for me to really press the principal a little bit more about having that pause in between that hour and a half and talking about that bell to bell experience, which I love, that idea. So I'm definitely, you know, dropping little nuggets here and there in preparation for next year.
Yeah.
Next school year.
I love that Toby's idea of bell to bell experience as well. And I think a layer to that is sometimes teachers get trapped into thinking about that experience in purely quantitative terms.
Absolutely.
How many things can we shove in, which is, at some level, that's okay because we want to give kids exposure to a number of things throughout the day, but there has to be a qualitative consideration and what's the depth of the experience rather than just the breadth of it. And that's obviously where mindfulness and SEL come in. Cool stuff. Did you have any questions?
No, not really. Not really. Mm-hmm.
More just a clarification of your own personal sense of direction or professional sense of direction of the work you want to start dialing into.
Yeah, because I've had the experience of, you know, I wanted to do school-wide mindfulness in the morning, having, you know, a set time and things. And my principal kind of said, let's just start with find out who's interested. He wanted that approach first. And so I had about 17 teachers who were kind of interested in starting and partnering, but they weren't consistent with the Inner Explorer. And so I realized that where I needed to kind of step it up was to really have them experience it first. And I really think that's key. Like, you can't shove anything down their throat. And that wasn't my approach, but I also wanted to just be more comfortable with just kind of leading those practices with them and letting them experience it firsthand. And I think I can do that through the groups, through rotating groups and things like that, and just kind of start that way. And we have a lot of professional development about, you know, academic stuff, right? It's very structured, and this is what we're going to be doing all day. And so my task is to try to get into some of the professional development training, get on that calendar, and where I'm not just talking about social work stuff and attendance and child abuse, but also mindfulness and SEL stuff. So
do you
definitely step it up.
Yeah. Do you guys have a specific first year teacher or new teacher kind of training protocol program thing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That is, I forgot to mention that in the Administrator Academy, that has been huge, is if you can get involved with the kind of onboard training of new teachers and first-time teachers who are coming into the school or district, I mean, that is the ideal place to start and embed that within their own kind of introduction into the school. Because one thing we've done well is we're hitting the kids with that freshman wellness for life class. But then with the new teachers coming in, we're also hitting the new teachers with this similar message. So you're slowly building capacity at the adult end of this spectrum, and then also at the student end of the spectrum. And I forgot to talk about that during the Administrative Academy. That's a really significant access point for doing this work is hitting the new teachers as they come in the building.
I like that idea, actually.
I think several things. The bell-to-bell experience was something that really was powerful for me as well. And also being really cognizant of mindful teaching, I guess maybe might be the word, but like just our presence during that experience in addition to everything that is going on. And so really a lot of processing, like the best way to organically deliver that message to teachers of and get them to experience that and that noticing that sacred pause, like and being able to bring that into it. And so I think that's just like you said, like the continued exposure to the staff of all the practices just in general, so of the practice in general, so that they are embodying it themselves, so that that can be a bell-to-bell experience, because and that's like a process. I think when we had our staff meeting, my boss was looking up something and somebody puts in the chat, can Monica, can you lead us in a mindfulness practice? And so like I had some teachers ask for that, and the goal was to start having like once a week me do like a little 10 minutes before our official contract hours started, like an opportunity for people to come in and do like a little 5 or 10 minute practice before the school day started. So just offer that like kind of as an option for people. And the stress management class was actually also kind of a piece of that, because it was like going to have components of mindfulness. So exposing people to like little snippets of it, and not just saying like, here's a mindfulness class, but here's a stress management class, and then have those tools in it and kind of expose them to that in another way, to getting that like buy-in and trying to figure out how to organically do that, I think is like what we're processing. It's definitely like picked up, like I think momentum for sure. And like, you know, I have like Tuesdays and Thursdays, I have a group of boys that come see me at the end of the day, and we do like a little mindfulness group. And I have a couple kids that come see me individually, like right at the beginning of my day when we were in session. And then I'm able to do little stuff during my class. So I think there's like this slow like exposure, and nothing is being like, you know, the teachers aren't being asked to teach it yet, but they're like, so we're slowly, I think, starting to create that culture, but just how to foster it and facilitate it even more.
Yeah. I think I heard you saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, of kind of nesting mindfulness within a larger approach.
Yeah.
So stress, I think I heard you saying stress management is kind of the larger umbrella, and then mindfulness would fall within that.
So this was like a district thing from the district. One of the principals, I had done like a mindfulness class actually for our community at the library, like a 6-week class that she took. And so she is like, I want to expose our faculty and staff to it, but I don't want it to like be, she's like, I think we'll have a greater buy-in if we say like, we're offering a stress management class and there's components, like I'll have mindfulness pieces in that. So it's like little bits of exposure, would not necessarily just come out and say, and maybe get a broader scope of staff from the whole district into that class, or so that there would be some exposure that way, you know, because I'm just in an elementary school right now. So like I have day-to-day contact with with them, my staff there, but trying to, district wide kind of get some exposure too.
Yeah. In my experience, it has been most effective to situate mindfulness within a larger approach, whether that be well-being, SEL, or something. I think mindfulness tends to stick more when it's a part of a larger initiative rather than an initiative in and of itself. For example, in our district, we really focused on SEL and just the general concept of well-being. What does it mean to be well? When a student graduates from Lake Forest High School, what do we want them to be able to do and feel from a social and emotional learning standpoint? And if you don't have that articulated, then what's your target? Right? We do this all the time academically. What do we want our kids to be able to know and do?
Right.
But why don't we do the emotional equivalent? Healthy, happy, and well Lake Forest High School student look like on graduation day? What are their habits of mind? What emotions do they have access to? What emotion management skills can they implement? How do they relate to fellow human beings? How do they communicate their inner world to other people? I mean, you can go on and on and on, but these are the discussions that are so important, because what you're doing is you're putting into higher resolution what success looks like. And if you don't do that, then what are you doing? I mean, you're just kind of John Dewey in Democracy of Education has this wonderful line in his chapter on the aims of education. And he talks about the difference between an aim and a result. And he talks about how a result is like the wind blowing across the desert, and sand moves from one spot to another. He's like, something changed, you had a result, but there's nothing in that shows a meaningful beginning, middle, and end, an outcome, right? And so then he juxtaposes that with bees making a beehive, and how they gather material, they work together, they construct something, and it sustains their way of life. And so he uses that as an analogy for aims of education, right? A lot of times we're not specific about what our target is, and so what we end up doing is just moving things around and changing things, but we have no basis to know whether or not those changes are leading to what we actually want. So getting stakeholders to sit down and really talk about what is well-being? How do we understand well-being in our school community? And then when you articulate it for a student, you can have a parallel conversation with staff. When a faculty member shows up and walks through these doors, what do we want them feeling? What do we want them thinking? What do we want their habits of mind to be? How do we want them to show or demonstrate resiliency? What internal self-regulation skills do they need to be able to do those things? And again, just the higher resolution articulation allows you to move towards it in a more meaningful and precise way.
Excellent.
Can I add a small piece in that too? I mean, it's definitely spot on with the integration. And I want to name that you may not even have other initiatives. Like Matt's building is ahead of the curve, and the district is ahead of the curve in a lot of what he's discussing. And so for me, in the district that I had, I just chunked it under culture climate. Like Matt's naming things that are about culture climate. And like every school in the nation has a culture climate section of what their expected learning outcomes are, what teacher proficiency skills are, what the administrative evaluation methods are. So culture climate, it can really fall under there, and showing data around improved outcomes around reduced suspensions, reduced behavior referrals. That is a way also to create an in if there's no other special thing to do, like wellness, like SEL, like being trauma informed. If any of that So culture, climate.
Awesome. Thank you.
For sure. And that's a really good point, Toby. My job, my day-to-day job focuses on the wellness piece. So my job is to look at the proactive, positive, that stuff. We have another person in our building who looks at well-being through the other half, which is, are fewer kids needing referrals for social work? Are fewer kids leaving school because of mental health issues? Are there fewer fights, visits to the dean's office? And all those things are, you're right, they're arguably as important or more important than all the wellness ideation stuff. So I think a full program or a full approach would integrate both elements of the continuum.
This was an administrator academy, and I was shocked to see like maybe only one administrator took the administrator academy. It was mostly, social workers, teachers, and such. So it hit me hard when Toby spoke, because she seemed like a true leader to me. A true leader and an admin that put the well-being of her students first and foremost. And so I guess the question I was kind of left with was this kind of systemic mindlessness that pervades our educational system, and how it's, I guess for me, I've done all these things, with my school. I've done videos and new teacher, old teacher, all these different things. But I think what's maybe made the most impact is my own personal practice and my own ability to work with my students, and the teachers, my colleagues as well. And I think that modeling of mindfulness can be a powerful way to affect a culture or affect a school. To the point where now, people, colleagues will reach out to me, students will come to me for assistance, and I'm hopefully able to lend that when I'm given the opportunity.
Yeah, for sure. When you're on point, it stands out, right? When your personal practice is thriving, that sends out an energy, and people recognize that, and the opposite of that is also true, except it has sometimes a repelling effect. But for sure, and that's actually an outstanding segue for where we're going next, which is just that, is that personal practice piece. Because, and I think I mentioned this in the first part of the Administrator Academy, that being in education is kind of the perfect recipe for emotional distress, because it requires that you care a lot, but it also requires that you continually confront conditions that are outside of your control. And that's not a good combination, to have a high emotional investment in something and very little control over the outcomes. Like, that is a recipe for negativity and emotional distress. And if you're not careful and conscious, and you don't develop a personal practice, we've all seen it happen to ourselves at periods of time, right? And we've all seen it happen to colleagues who get swept away in the undertow of negativity. And sadly, I've seen people just not return from that just becomes their career trajectory, that they started in one place, the undertow came, they got swept up, and it's just downstream. It's like, bye, I guess I'm not going to see you again. And that's really sad. And it speaks to the importance of having the necessity of having that counterforce, which is personal practice. There's a really interesting paper I'm put on the email after this by a guy named Jose Herrero, where he found that just by what he called volitional respiration, just by deliberately breathing, so just paying attention to your breathing, organized the neuronal activity of the brain. So just by consciously tapping into your breathing, you don't even have to change it. Just by consciously noticing that you're breathing, you're regulating your brain state. The different parts of your brain and the neuronal activity between the different parts of the brain all kind of orchestrate and come into alignment when you pay attention to respiration.
I think Thich Nhat Hanh would be happy with that.
What's that?
I think Thich Nhat Hanh would be happy with that conclusion.
Yeah. And so a lot of times, because I do teach a lot of breath work stuff, and people get really geeked out about the specific techniques. You know, do I breathe slower on the inhale or the exhale, or do I do this and that? And all that stuff's great, and it does have an influence on your state. But the most important thing, by far, is just the awareness of your breathing and how your breathing is communicating your overall state, just where you're at in a given moment. And so just that awareness, anchoring that awareness in the breath is the most important piece. So I'm glad you're thinking of incorporating that into your personal practice. That's awesome. Very cool. Did we all go? I think you were the last person. Okay, so let's end with, do you mind if we do like a 5-minute exercise? Okay. My personal bias is to talk less and allow you to experience silence more. I will just chime in every now and then, just as a reminder, if your mind is drifting off, to just come back to an awareness of your breath. But for this particular exercise, this is just basic mindfulness of breath, which is feel yourself breathing and use your recognition of your breath as a window into feeling your body as a whole. And as you feel your body as a whole, use your body as a window into feeling the environment that you're in, the room that you're in. And if and when you notice your mind or your attention has drifted away from that conscious awareness of breath, body, and environment, then just bring it back to the breath. That's always the foundation. Come back to that sensation. Open up to that sensation of the body as a whole. Feel the whole body breathing. And then feel as if the whole room is breathing through you breathing in your body. And that's the practice. It's just to keep coming back to that. So I'll ring the bell here, and I'll let you enjoy some silence and practice on your own. Feel free to close your eyes if they're not closed, if that's more relaxing for you. If you found that your attention is drifting and you want a more concrete sensation of your breath, again, just put your right hand on your belly and your left hand on your chest. That helps anchor your awareness a little more. Or if you're comfortable where you're at, that's fine too. If your attention has wandered off, just gently invite it back to the sensation of the breath. And as you notice the breath, feel into the body as a whole. Bottoms of your feet, the sensation of the clothes you're wearing on your skin, just the feeling of your body being upright in space. And just notice the breath, the center of all of that. On the count of 3, we're going to take a long, slow exhalation in. This time we're going to hold it for 10 seconds once we've filled up all the way. And then after the 10 seconds, you're just going to slowly let that air out and consciously relax your muscles as you do that. So 1, 2, 3, slowly breathe in, fill up all the way. And then once you're full, hold your breath. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And now as you exhale, just let all the tension go in your body. Slowly let that air out. You can wiggle your toes. You can make a fist with your hands and then spread your fingers out. And again, you can gently pull down on your ears, pull up on your ears. And slowly open your eyes. And here we are.